It is Monday, March 17th, and President Trump unleashing a political earthquake in D.C. this morning after all of Joe Biden's last-minute preemptive pardons have been ordered null and void. Dems and the media livid. The White House press briefing today turning rowdy as outlets like CNN and The Times appear to be acting more as Joe Biden's attorney instead of independent journalists. We're going to show you that. Also, we'll show you who is first in line on the chopping block, because heads will be rolling for this, and more stories as well from around the country. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel, and consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So normally, the President of the United States has broad authority to issue pardons. POTUS can pardon whomever he wishes, even by Autopen, from what we understand. We looked into this morning. We're not attorneys over here, but we spoke to someone in the know about the thought process here, and challenging these pardons would normally be a non-starter, not even questionable. However, here's Joe Biden's problem. Did the president authorize someone to auto-pen the pardon? If they did this behind his back, without his direct authorization, if Joe Biden had no knowledge about this, makes it a completely different story. And apparently, he was told after the fact. President Trump announcing last night on Truth Social, these pardons have been ordered null and void, writing this: the pardons that sleepy Joe Biden gave to the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs and many others hereby declared void, vacant, and of no further force or effect because of the fact that they were done by Autopen. In other words, Joe Biden did not sign them, but more importantly, he did not know anything about them. The necessary pardoning documents were not explained to or approved by Joe Biden. He knew nothing about them, and the people that did may have committed a crime. Therefore, those on the Unselect Committee who destroyed and deleted all evidence obtained during their 2-year witch hunt of me and many other innocent people should fully understand that they are subject to investigation at the highest level. The fact is, they were probably responsible for the documents that were signed on their behalf without the knowledge or consent of the worst president in the history of our country, crooked Joe Biden. White House press briefing today was like a firestorm. Every left-wing reporter going full bore on Trump's press secretary, on Kaitlan Leavitt. But the worst by far, was what happened between CNN and Kaitlan Leavitt. Kaitlan Collins from CNN ended up getting roasted, put on blast after she asked during her question time if there was any evidence supporting Trump's claim. Why say this without evidence, she asked. Watch Kaitlan Leavitt respond. Watch this. Roll the tape.
Saying that the pardons that were issued by President Biden preemptively to members of the January 6th committee, that they're now null and void. Have attorneys here at the White House told President Trump that he has the legal authority to undo a pardon simply because it was signed by Autopen, as he said?
The president was begging the question that I think a lot of journalists in this room should be asking about whether or not the former president of the United States, who I think we can all finally agree was cognitively impaired. I know it took people some time to finally admit that, but we all know that to be true, as evidenced by his disastrous debate performance against President Trump during the campaign. I digress on that. But the president was raising the point that, did the president even know about these pardons? Was his legal signature used without his consent or knowledge? And that's not just the president or me raising those questions, Kaitlan. According to the New York Post, there are Biden officials from the previous White House who raised those questions and wondered if the president was even consulted about his legally binding signature being signed onto documents. And so I think it's a question that everybody in this room should be looking into, because certainly that would propose perhaps criminal or illegal behavior if staff members were signing the President of the United States autograph without his consent.
Biden is on the record talking about issuing preemptive pardons to these people.
But was he aware of his signature being used?
And she has a good point. Isn't this something as reporters you'd want to look into? Most of this comes down to the last-minute preemptive pardons Joe Biden handed out for all 9 members of the J6 committee, including Liz Cheney, including Benny Thompson, but also to Adam Schiff, Anthony Fauci, Mark Milley. All of these people pardoned preemptively, something that's never happened before. giving them all a free pass, wiping away any crime that they may or may not have committed. Something Joe Biden, as it turns out, may have had no say over. Trump claiming Biden knew nothing about the pardons, that he never authorized them, saying they were issued behind his back, which, if true, would be flat out illegal. In another story, ActBlue, the Democrats' principal political action committee, their primary funding vehicle, now under criminal investigation. Elon Musk revealing in a new interview with Ted Cruz how ActBlue's funding isn't real grassroots, that many of their so-called donors are actually lifelong Republicans who've never donated before. That somehow ActBlue is getting tens of thousands of donations from everyday Americans who've never donated a dime in their life. How is that possible? Their donation numbers, always suspect. People have always had questions about this. Huge small dollar donations, way more than the Republican Party, almost twice as many. We know they're now under investigation, a congressional inquiry, and the DOJ trying to figure this out. The names linked to the donations turns out are real people, but the form of payment that they used, where the payment came from, is not linked to that same person. So your name could show in ActBlue's donor logs, but in reality, you've never donated a dime to the Democrat Party. Top leadership at ActBlue, all resigning in the last 3 weeks. The DOJ actively investigating where the money is coming from. Who's really behind these illegal donations? We've heard speculation, again, just speculation that a lot of this came from overseas credit card fraud rings. But again, it's just speculation at this point. Here's Elon breaking down what they've found so far. Watch this.
Well, I will say if ActBlue and Arabella Networks...
ActBlue is a huge scam, next level.
Do you think it's foreign money, Chinese money? Where do you think the money in ActBlue is coming from? And how do you figure that out?
Well, it's not coming from from a whole bunch of, from a groundswell of public support. Because when individual donors are looked at in ActBlue, a bunch of them turn out to be like diehard Republicans,
right? People
that have never given money in their life. So you're going to track down a bunch of these people where it says, oh, I gave $16,000. And they're like, I didn't give $16,000. What are you talking about?
Well, if those
Republican friends of mine found themselves on the ActBlue list, they're like, it definitely wasn't me. So that's...
If it can actually be shown that they are funding firebombing of Tesla charging stations, that's objectively a criminal act. That is funding terrorist activity.
Right.
And the statutes make clear that an incendiary device qualifies. So that's a big deal.
Is a terrorist activity. Yeah.
This is the same entity, by the way, ActBlue, who's funding the anti-Tesla and Tesla takedown movements, funding left-wing extremists to attack and firebomb Tesla vehicles, dealerships, basically anything related to Tesla they go after. In another story, we have some of the backstory about the 250-plus violent illegal gang members who the Trump administration just sent to El Salvador on a plane this weekend. It turns out Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff, who, by the way, is one of the most powerful people in Washington right now, it turns out he secretly coordinated these flights to happen under the radar before that activist judge had a chance to sign the order halting the transport. By the time the judge signed the order, the planes were already over international waters, something the media finding out about this morning, having a conniption over. Watch Stephen Miller go to town this morning on the media and these left-wing lawyers who were defending Tren de Aragua being deported. This is great. Watch.
But let me play this first from somebody who I know is not a favorite of President Trump. This is Andrew Weissman, who's a former top Mueller prosecutor. Of course, it's not a huge surprise that he didn't like this operation. He doesn't think it's legal under the act that you just mentioned, Stephen. Watch.
We're not at war with Venezuela. We're not at war with the gang that is the subject of the executive order. There is no invasion that is going on. And you also have to show that the people you're removing are actually part of that gang, even if there were an invasion or a war. And this statute may, in fact, be very unconstitutional.
So the judge has to be convinced that these individuals aren't real. I mean, it's a huge group, and nobody's going to miss any of these people, but they're quantifiable. So can you prove that these individuals were linked with Tren de Aragua and that Tren de Aragua is part of a Maduro operation, Stephen?
So first of all, Andrew Weissman is an absolute moron. He is a moron, and he is a fool, and he's a degenerate. Andrew Weissman has devoted his career to putting innocent Americans in jail, taking away their civil liberties. He was involved in the Mueller coup against a democratically elected President Donald J. Trump. Weissman should never be on TV anywhere. He should hang his head in eternal shame for what he's done to this country. And now he's up there shilling for people who rape and murder Americans. That's who Andrew Weissman is. I met the mother of Jocelyn Nungary, Alexis Nungary, who President Trump honored at the State of the Union, named a national wildlife refuge after her daughter. Tren de Aragua terrorists took that 12-year-old angel and they tortured her to death. They sexually assaulted her. They stripped her and they dumped her body in a river. That's who President Trump has deported from this country. Behind every single one of those terrorists was another future rape victim, another future sex trafficking victim, another future murder victim. Most importantly, every one of those people was here illegally. They have no right to be in this country for 1 second longer. They are illegal aliens, they are foreign terrorists, they are alien enemies. And the law at the heart of this issue was signed in the founding generation of this country, the same generation that wrote our Constitution. People say, oh, it's an 18th century law. You know what else is an 18th century law? The Constitution of the United States, the Bill of Rights of the United States. The founding generation gave us this law, gave President Trump this law to repel this invasion from our country.
And it was
all detailed in the proclamation how this gang was sent here by a foreign government, and President Trump is sending them out of this country.
CBP has just awarded the first border wall contract of Trump's second term. U.S. Customs and Border Protection awarding the border wall contract to a company called Granite Construction for $70 million to construct 7 miles of new border wall in Hidalgo County, Texas. That's within the Rio Grande Valley. The monies awarded are from CBP's fiscal year 2021 funding, not new funds. And they say this contract will close critical openings in the border wall that were left incomplete due to canceled contracts from the last administration. Democrats angry about $70 million for a permanent border wall, but they're fine with spending $20 million on Sesame Street in Iraq. Explain that to me. In another story, inflation continuing to fall. Egg prices correcting again this morning, now falling 58% in the last month alone. A wholesale dozen of eggs has fallen to $4.15. Last month, they were as high as $8 in some places. Watch ABC report the good news this morning. Promises made, promises kept. Watch this.
Finally, there is some good news. These are staples in all of our fridges. A lot of people love eggs. Many of us have them. And finally, I have some good news for you. The USDA says wholesale egg prices dropped for the third straight week, and it's a pretty big drop. The average wholesale price nationwide fell to $4.15 per dozen. So let's put that in perspective. That is down about $2.70 in just 1 week. Prices were over $8 at the end of last month. So part of the reason for the steep drop is people were put off by those high prices, so demand is lower. The other reasons, experts say, are because bird flu outbreaks have decreased. And get this, Easter is really late this year, so demand isn't that high right now.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.